Hello and welcome. I'm Geeta, Mohan and you're watching World Today. Now, world markets won a reprieve on Tuesday after 3 days of heavy selling that wiped trillions of dollars off the value of shares. But caution prevailed with focus on whether Washington might be willing to negotiate on some of its aggressive tariffs. Wall Street's main indices opened sharply higher on Tuesday after a bruising sell-off that has wiped out trillions of dollars since last week. US President Donald Trump said on Tuesday that he discussed tariffs, shipbuilding and potential energy deals in a great call, is what he's calling it, with acting South Korean President Han Duck-soo. Trump, in a social media post, said, and I quote, "We have the confines and probability of a great deal for both countries. The top team is on a plane heading to the US and things are looking good." While the markets gingerly start to look up, US President Donald Trump and China sparred over tariff hikes and other retaliatory moves on Tuesday. Adding fuel to the fire, US Vice President J.D. Vance, in an interview to TV News yesterday, called Chinese people peasants. China was quick to respond, calling VP Vance's remarks ignorant and disrespectful.
I think it's useful for all of us to step back and ask ourselves, what has the globalist economy gotten the United States of America? And the answer is fundamentally it's based on two principles: incurring a huge amount of debt to buy things that other countries make for us. And to make it a little bit more crystal clear, we borrow money from Chinese peasants to buy the things those Chinese peasants manufacture. That is not a recipe for economic prosperity. It's not a recipe for low prices, and it's not a recipe for good jobs in the United States of America.
China's position on China-US trade relations has been made very clear. It is surprising and saddening to hear such ignorant and disrespectful remarks from this vice president.
This war of words is just another fodder in the all-out tariff war between America and China. The US president has announced an additional 50% tariff on China in less than 48 hours after Beijing announced a tit-for-tat 34% tariff on the United States of America. Reports say China is mulling a multi-front economic pushback.
We have many countries that are coming to negotiate deals with us, and they're going to be fair deals. And in certain cases, they're going to be paying substantial tariffs. There'll be fair deals. With China, as you know, against my statement, they put a 34% tariff on above what their ridiculous tariffs were already. And I said, if that tariff isn't removed by tomorrow at 12 o'clock, we're putting a 50% tariff on above the tariffs that we put on. So they've gone for years. They've become a rich country because of people, again, that were in the White House that allowed this to happen. Hundreds of billions of dollars a year they'd make on us on trade, and it shouldn't be that way. And I have a great relationship with President Xi. I hope it's going to stay that way. I have great respect for China.
Chinese make up for nearly 20% of Asian Americans, with nearly 5.4 million people. Like all immigrant communities, they rely heavily on goods imported from mainland China. But now, with the tit-for-tat tariff policy, those daily items are going to be very dear.
And now that because many imports coming in paying high tariffs, so they will be translating into more higher costs for the wholesaler, the importers, and then it will be trickling down to the retailers. And guess what? Toward the end, it's all consumers are paying for it.
Soy sauce, noodles, starch, this is a basic consumer product. Day to day, they use a lot and a large volume, but you put up that much tax on it, that will jet up the price a lot. Right now, the tax is 54%. Once we run out our inventory, definitely we're going to raise the price of 54%.
After this week, we might going to increase the price for those the products. I mean those in the ingredient and then the sauce. How much they pretend, how much will be, how much they're going to increase the price for us.
Let's break down the mathematics of Trump's tariffs on China. With a fresh 50% tariff threat looming that comes on top of the 34% reciprocal tariffs slapped on April 2nd, and an early 20% for failing to curb fentanyl flow into the United States, the total tariff can go up to 104%. This is not taking into account the pre-existing tariffs of 7.5% to 25% from Trump's first term as president. China is unfazed, calling Trump's tariffs blackmail and disruption of the global economic order. The Xi Jinping administration says they will not hesitate to fight back.
The Chinese government strongly condemns and firmly opposes such actions. The US approach is a typical act of unilateralism, protectionism, and economic bullying, which causes harm to others while backfiring on itself.
China is considering a multi-front economic pushback. First in line is a ban on Hollywood films. This will hit US studios as their films earned nearly $585 million in China in 2024 alone. China may also suspend its fentanyl cooperation with the United States, target US intellectual property benefits, and finally impose curbs on trade in services.
Pressure, threats, and blackmail are not the right ways to deal with China. China will surely take necessary measures to resolutely safeguard its legitimate rights and interests. If US disregards the interests of both countries and the international community and insists on engaging in tariff war and trade war, China will fight to the end.
With both Beijing and Washington refusing to bend even a little, it is the people in the end who will pay the price of this tit-for-tat tariff war. Bureau Report, India Today.
Joining us now on the broadcast is economist Santosh Mehrotra, also visiting professor, Center for Development, University of Bath. Santosh, thank you so much for joining us here on the network. We're looking at a massive tariff war between the United States of America and China. But is this a game of who's going to blink first? And in the meanwhile, how much is either side really going to lose?
Both sides are going to lose significantly. I think most important is the fact that we in India and everyone around the world need to understand that even though Mr. Trump and his team appear confused and inconsistent, they're very clear-eyed about what they want to achieve. I just want to share with you what I believe has already been said by Treasury Secretary, who's himself, the Scott Bessent is who I'm talking about, who's himself a hedge fund billionaire. He's spoken about a global economic reordering that he intends to shape to the benefit of the US elite. And it's important that Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, is only echoing what Trump's new chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, Mr. Steve Moran, has written in a lengthy paper, which is called A User's Guide to Restructuring the Global Trading System. And that was written just a few weeks before his appointment as the chair of the Presidential Economic Council's advisors. So the objective is, of the US, that if they raise tariffs, what will happen is that exporters will not be able to export as much to the United States. So the current account deficit of the United States will fall, and the massive dollar reserves that are held by the debt creditors of the US, meaning those who have built up trillions of dollars of foreign exchange reserves, which are actually held in the United States in the form of US Treasury bonds, in the US.
Right.
On that, the United States government can default. In other words, it can say, look, what we are doing is that we are running up massive current account deficits because you are selling too many goods to us. Now,
Right.
you and I may well believe that this is stupid logic, and it certainly is. There is no question. It's stupid logic for the following reason. Let me just explain for the benefit of your viewers. Because the reason why the United States is a massive importer, meaning it imports much more than it exports, is because the US government runs a massive deficit. One.
Right.
And secondly, the American consumers, they borrow and spend. They
That's true.
borrow on their credit card and spend, which is the
Professor
reason why
Mehrotra,
they, yeah.
yeah, so what you're actually saying is that US does not have the absorption power. But in that, we also have to look into how it now then deals with India in this entire tariff war. Now, please stay on with us. We continue with our coverage after Black Monday on Dalal Street. Tuesday marked a new beginning for the Indian market. Dalal Street showed signs of recovery on Tuesday after a stormy start to the week. Despite the sharp fall on Monday, the Nifty managed to stay above the 22,000 level, which is considered an important support level. The Sensex jumped 902.75 points to reach 74,000, marking a rise of more than 1.5% for both indices. Meanwhile, government sources have said the PMO is monitoring impact on Indian share market and it is working towards cushioning impact on the economy. Sources also said PSUs have been asked to distribute profits to investors. Meanwhile, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar dialed US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, where the two nations agreed that it is important to conclude a bilateral trade agreement soon. U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer at the Senate Finance Committee hearing on Tuesday said India is reducing tariffs, but also criticized it for being tough on tariffs and being protectionist.
The administration has announced it's negotiating an agreement also with India, and it appears already to be yielding results, such as India dropping its digital services tax. Although India has high tariffs, its non-tariff barriers are just as significant, if not more so. Will you try to include commitments on matters such as intellectual property, technical barriers to trade, and science-based agricultural rules to take on those barriers?
Yes, and I have a standing call with my Indian counterpart to address these very issues.
Professor Mehrotra, if I could come to you on how this pans out for India. The tariffs are high, they're huge. What's the impact that you think India could have? Because they expect not just reducing of tariffs, but also removal of non-tariff barriers.
Well, the India case is a slightly different case. I think we need to appreciate this. India's government had actually increased its tariffs over the last 7 or 8 years. India's tariffs used to be much lower than they have been for the last 7 or 8 years. And we were behaving in a protectionist manner, and this was actually raising our own costs because there are significant imports which go into products we produce domestically for export. The import intensity of our exports is actually quite high. The capital intensity of our exports is quite high. So this was hurting our own exports because we were maintaining relatively high tariffs. We should have been reducing tariffs in any case. Our tariff rates were higher than those of China, higher than those of Vietnam, etc. It's another matter that now our tariff rates are planned to be brought down in the process of negotiation. It's not a very good thing that the Indian government, even on the 1st of February on the budget, had reduced our tariffs, because that should have been done as part of a negotiation. Doing it in advance is actually shooting yourself in the foot, because if it was done as part of the negotiation, it would have given the US an for us to say, look, you want us to reduce tariffs, we are reducing tariffs.
Right.
But if you reduce them in advance of the start of negotiations, then you have to go several steps further. So,
Right.
we'll have to be, it's very important that as we proceed in these bilateral trade negotiations, and by the way, let's just be very clear, this is not going to be a free trade agreement. We will be negotiating on the size of the tariffs on both sides.
Right.
Anyway, bottom line is that we must not be spineless in this matter. Please note that although initially on the 2nd of April, pharmaceuticals
Professor
were excluded. Let me just make
Right.
this one sentence. This is a very important point. Pharmaceuticals are a very large Indian export. Please appreciate this. Now, he had left, the US administration had left out pharmaceuticals from raising tariffs on import. Now, he's already talked about raising tariffs on pharmaceuticals as well. So we are going to be hurt.
That's true.
So, yeah, so we have to be
That's
very
true, I
careful
know.
in our negotiations. Yeah.
So very careful in our negotiations is what is being advised by economist Santosh Mehrotra. Thank you so much for joining us here on the network. Israeli strikes on the Gaza Strip overnight and into Tuesday killed at least 25 people, including 8 children and 5 women. Israel has dramatically expanded its footprint in the Gaza Strip since relaunching its war against Hamas last month. It now controls more than 50% of the territory and is squeezing Palestinians into shrinking wedges of land. The US president, who met Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House on Monday, said that he would like to see the ongoing war in Gaza come to an end, pointing to what he believes is a not too distant future for peace.
I think it's something that we would be involved in, but, having a peace force like the United States there, controlling and owning the Gaza Strip would be a good thing.
The humanitarian crisis in Gaza continues to deepen, with Israeli forces targeting what they claim are Hamas strongholds. Civilian casualties are mounting. Since Israel's second wave of attacks began, almost 1,000 people have been killed. And aid agencies warn that Gaza is on the brink of total collapse, with food, water and medical supplies running dangerously low. And amid this devastation, Donald Trump has put forward his dramatic and divisive plan of Gaza yet again. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu came calling, and the US President put forward his solution.
You know what I call it? A great location that nobody wants to live in, because they really don't. And when they have good living, real living, where Hamas and all of the problems they have, the level of death on the Gaza Strip is just incredible. And I've said it. I don't understand why Israel ever gave it up. Israel owned it. It wasn't this man, so I can say it. He wouldn't have given it up. I know him very well. There's no way. They took oceanfront property and they gave it to people for peace. How did that work out? Not good.
President Trump wants a total reconstruction of Gaza led by the US, with promises of jobs, housing and infrastructure. Prime Minister Netanyahu, though careful not to endorse Trump's plan outright, acknowledged the need for new governance in Gaza.
The President put forward a vision, a bold vision, which we discussed as well, including the countries that might be amenable and are amenable to accepting Palestinians of their free choice if they choose to go there. And I think that's the second thing that we discussed. But the hostages came right on top.
This same proposal earlier sparked outrage, and the two-nation theory has been there as a solution for decades now, but never materialized as a proper answer in reality. With Harsh Rajput, Bureau Report, India Today Global.
Donald Trump's peace solution for Gaza is not what other Middle East countries agree on. Neither do people of Israel and Palestine.
لا والشهداء بالملايين لا والشهداء بالملايين جيش محمد بدأ يعود جيش محمد بدأ يعود.
People in Israel and in Gaza enclave are protesting. Both Palestinians and Israelis are not happy with their respective governing authorities. The long-drawn Hamas-Israel war has killed and separated families. Neither are they content with the solution proposed by the US president.
We are here today actually to send a very clear message to our Prime Minister. Your problems are here, we are your citizens, and you have to solve the problem with us. Going to Hungary, then to the US will not solve any problem. We have to solve the problems here. Stop dividing us. The Supreme Court, the army, the security services, the police, we are here forever. You fail.
Enough blood, by God. A message from me, Mr. Trump, Mr. Netanyahu. Enough war, enough bloodshed among children. You are killing innocent children. You are not killing the resistance. If you were killing the resistance, it would have ended in the first place.
Egypt and Jordan, key regional players, have rejected any idea of absorbing Palestinian refugees. Arab nations and human rights groups warn that forcibly removing the population from their homeland violates international law and could ignite regional unrest. A few months back, in a joint statement, France, Jordan and Egypt supported the idea of the Palestinians regaining control of Gaza, a proposal long dismissed by Israel.
France also agrees with Egypt on one major point, and I want to reiterate it here forcefully. We firmly oppose the displacement of populations and any annexation of Gaza or the West Bank. This would be a violation of international law and a serious threat to the security of the entire region, including that of Israel. Hamas must have no part in this governance and must no longer pose a threat to Israel.
The region emphasizes on post-war roadmap that respects Palestinian sovereignty and avoid unilateral moves that risk worsening the crisis. In this, the US president's plan appears more like a bold campaign statement than a diplomatically viable roadmap. But the timing, as Israel escalates military operations, could shift global discourse. Trump may well push forward with this idea, putting Washington at odds with not just the Arab world, but potentially Europe too. For now, his vision faces massive political, ethical and logistical hurdles. With Harsh Rajput, Bureau Report, India Today Global.
Jonathan Kim and 2 Russian cosmonauts to the International Space Station. The Russian Soyuz 2.1A rocket blasted off from the Baikonur Cosmodrome in Kazakhstan, carrying Kim and Russians Sergei Ryzhikov and Alexei Zubritsky. 3 hours later, they docked with the ISS. Once the hatches were opened, Kim and the Russians were shown smiling and hugging their companions on the station, which now has 10 people on board, including 4 NASA astronauts, 5 Russians and Japanese astronaut Takuya Onishi. Moscow has hailed this expedition as an example of fruitful Russia-US space cooperation.
Great, point 1.
We have contact, we have capture. At 3.
Well, that's all in this edition of World Today. But before I go, the dire wolf is back. This is Romulus and Remus. They are the world's first ever de-extinct animals. They have a sister, Khaleesi, who was just 2 months old. The dire wolf, lost to history over 10,000 years ago, has returned. Reborn on the 1st of October 2024, these remarkable pups were brought back to life using ancient DNA extracted from fossilized remains. These 2 wolves were brought back from extinction using genetic edits derived from a complete dire wolf genome, meticulously reconstructed by colossal biosciences from ancient DNA found in fossils dating back 11,500 and 72,000 years. Domestic dogs were used as surrogate mothers to bring Romulus and Remus and their sister Khaleesi to the world. Soon after the dire wolves news broke out, it started trending on internet, and in no time, it became one of the trending topics on X. Enjoy the visuals. Goodbye and take care.